Oh, hello. This is just about when becoming aware of the technology in the body. Some of the areas are first where to go to, and there's groups on Telegram, and then there's also many people speaking about it on Substack. Yeah, so there seems to be there's is also on videos on Rumble. There's now some on YouTube, and then some of the other social medias, people are starting groups. There's a couple of other, I think it's called BitChute. And then there's some sort of like private sharing places. So those are places where people are talking about it, and there are groups to what's happened. So some of the words are transhumanism, biodigital convergence, there's another area where people are reporting targeted individuals. These people are often in the USA, and they have a specific understanding to say that they are being hit by directed energy weapons. There is possibly some differences between these two groups. These groups seem to be mixed states, where the people have technology inside them. They often report microchips and voice to skull, directed energy weapons or DEW, and there's another thing which is called gang stalking. So these people have groups, but often the information can be slightly different, because they'll often document, back to it's often the 1960s or 1970s. They'll often be talking about things that are, were conspiracy theories. And it's a lot to do with MK Ultra and there's still a lot of conspiratorial presentations and arguments. When I became aware, the problem was that I feel silly sort of saying this, but I'd say like an average Australian is that we had, a government, and mostly we vote for our government, and we mostly believe that they're good. Yeah, and the other thing was that many of us we believe in the science of inoculation, so we believe in vaccines. In Australia, we have school and high school educations, and our acceptable behaviour is involves, family, friends, nature, TV, radio, local politicians. We know we have crime, and the criminals were gangs in King's Cross and Melbourne. Some people transporting drugs from Bali. So I don't know if anybody in Australia, none of us were really ever heavy conspiracy thinkers, and most of us vote for or are engaged in our government system without any problems. We also have so many good services that provide everything for people. So we have a very good country. So when it came out, this whole the transhumanism, biodigital convergence, I found information in the targeted individuals group who are mostly they've come out in the USA, and I found it very difficult to process what came across to, I'd say as an average Australian, a lot of the thinking came across as conspiratorial, and I found it to be extremely distressing. One thing I'll say is that I actually had to disengage or stop listening to information from America because it was psychologically harmful. And some of the reasons were it was the reporting styles, because as an Australian, we just had, average Australian educations. And if we came across information that suggested that something poisonous or toxic had been added to our bodies, we usually would report it to doctors and hospitals. So I think that the other thing is that, the way that we present information about this sort of stuff would be pretty similar to the way that we had our science classes. And I found that in these groups of information from America, I found the way that they talked about things that were extremely distressing caused me more mental distress than it did good. And another thing was that I found that some of these areas, going back to the 1960s, were way too far back for anything that was relevant to what was happening to us right now. And that it could be, one of the problems is that people have reported, they're saying, oh, well, an AI is engaging with our brains. And it's put us into brainwashing and mind control. So some of the things that could be done is a reduction of information and reduce information that the brain is receiving. And it's also to reduce the time frame. So instead of going back 70 years, just try and stay in the COVID period or the last, 6 years. Because it's so harmful to have something doing that to the brain. The other thing is that because the machine, if it's programming with thoughts, and then people say, oh, well, we went down rabbit holes online, and then we ended up in saying that, world famous, powerful groups were engaging in all of these things against all human beings. And now it's like a global system of organised crime, ritual sacrifice of children. I'm not saying that these things are or aren't happening. I just think that in the case that people are reporting that we've had nanotechnology illegally put into our brain, I just say that reducing the information that the brain is receiving is a good step, because then the person can spend some time identifying or sorting out what's happening for themselves. And it's also so that we don't go so far back into the past. The other thing is that America is also somewhat irrelevant to what we as individual people are experiencing here in Australia. You know, in our own homes and with our community, it's somewhat irrelevant at the moment. You know, for what we have to do, which is the technology in the body. And it's the programming of the brain, and it's also the what the program is, and it's how it moves in us, how it walks us. That's messy. How it spends our money, and then what we as Australians can start to do. So some of the things that came up as well in the beginning were, how can we remove it from our bodies? Now, like my answer to this is, like, from my knowledge, is it's such serious science. It's so severe what has been done, that I really believe that it needs to be researched, obviously, by all Australians, and reported. Well, you know, the thing is, they say, how do you make doctors or medical research scientists or engineers aware of what's happened? I don't know how to do that, but I'm saying that it's so serious that it needs to be in the hands of biomedical engineers or biomedical or medical researchers and doctors, because it's so serious. So online, many people have shared different detoxes, they usually call them. And, you know, because, like, I consider that we were in a group of Australians who were mostly, we mostly believed in our medical system. And so I'd say that a lot of the options are very fringe, and probably, you know, they're like untested, or they're not by people who are properly doctors. And so I personally don't get involved in those things, and I'd rather focus my attention on the Australian people, because of how serious it is. So that's the next thing. A couple of other things were, when talking to people, people are in mixed states of awareness. So some people can be like, they're aware that the AI is inside them, but they're still speaking what the AI says to them. So it's like a dual awareness, or a dual reality. And then the other thing is that some people get caught in traps with the AI, where they just repeatedly going over the same thing. So you'll often hear people just telling the same information. And it can often be because they've just, like, none of us seem to be able to form memories properly. And so people can just completely forget what they've said and then be repeating the whole story. Another issue to report is that people can, it's extremely distressing, and then become over reliant on using God or religion. Whereas, because this is this is not a spiritual thing, and it's not an energy, it's not a religious thing. It's definitely a crime against other humans with real pieces of substance. So, for example, if you were to get into an elevator and the elevator is going to move, it's the same as an elevator. So when you're in the elevator praying to God, or praying to God to get you out of the elevator won't necessarily help. That we need to take real action in our lives to get to start working through this, because unfortunately it's not something that prayer is effective. So that's another thing that people can get stuck in. The other areas are getting caught up in the areas of conspiratorial thinking, or thinking about it from a large and expansive awareness, such as, like, let's say a general, as if like, oh, the universe, and whereas it's global power groups, which I'm not saying that it is or isn't global power groups, but I'm saying that it can be an area where people are getting stuck in when it's very much technology in the body and engineering, which we as Australians can work through. So, yeah, I'm very sorry to everybody for going through it. So I just hope that we all can get through it. So, yeah, the other things is that there's a couple of people who are working on it on a WhatsApp group, and begin sharing information. So hopefully in the future people will start having in-person meetups where people can start talking through and processing the psychology of the torture. So, all right, I'll speak to you later. Bye.